Joining me right now to talk about it is former CKE CEO Andy Puzder and economist and former Trump advisor Steve Moore. Gentlemen, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here this weekend. Andy, let me get your take right off the bat. Give us your assessment of the data we saw this week from the CPI coming in at 9.1% higher year over year, to the PPI at above 11%, to the earnings period that started off rocky with a weaker than expected report from JP Morgan.
Well, we also saw the retail sales numbers come out. And while retail sales were up 1% in the month of June, as you know, inflation was up 1.3% in the month of June. So people, again, are spending more and getting less. This is an economy that's headed in the wrong direction. There really are no policies at the Biden administration level that are going to address these problems. We need supply side policies. We need improvements in the supply chain, and those can only come about by encouraging businesses to generate more growth and generate more productivity. So the numbers are reflecting, I think, what Americans have been experiencing for months, which is that we're probably in a recession, very likely in a recession, and that inflation, contrary to the Biden administration claims, has not peaked, which is what wholesale pricing tells us, being up, I think it was up 11.3%. The record's 11.6 set last March. So we're seeing wholesale prices up, and that's going to find its way into retail prices over the coming months.
Yeah, I guess with the inflation numbers and the slowing economy, Steve, you've got to believe that this solidifies the Federal Reserve raising interest rates 75 basis points when it meets in 2 weeks' time, July 27th. How do you assess the week?
Boy, the Fed's in a tough position right now, Maria. They've waited way too long. I've been making this point on your show for many months that the Fed should have been raising rates much sooner, and now their job is a lot tougher because you've got an economy. I agree with Andy Puzder. We're in a soft recession already, and now they have to raise interest rates to bring this inflation rate down, and that's going to cause a lot of pain and suffering. Now, I do think Andy's right that these numbers on inflation are just terrible, but for the last 2 or 3 weeks, you do see a reduction in commodity prices. So that indicates that I think you're going to see a gradual reduction in inflation. But when you have the numbers this high, even bringing the numbers down to, the 5 or 6% range, which is still really high, is going to require the Fed to take some really urgent action. And we'll see whether it's 75 basis points or 100. But I think that it may require a whole series of these rate hikes over the course of the next months, and that will slow down the economy for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that inflation goes back to 2% overnight. I mean, let's face it, when Joe Biden walked into the Oval Office, the CPI was at 1.4%. Andy, you're talking about a consumer price index at 9.1%, but that doesn't include a lot of the essentials. I mean, food, fuel, and rent are the essentials in life, and all of those things are up in the double digits. You're talking about things like a dozen eggs, up 32% year over year, much higher than the average 9.1% increase we saw in the CPI this week.
Yeah, that's devastating for American families. As I said, they've been suffering through a real recession for a number of months now. Whether we were technically in a recession, we'll find out soon. But it's been a real recession for American families. And it's been devastating for America's small businesses who are attempting to absorb these price increases, but really can't. The commodity costs, rent, labor are all surging at the same time. So in the past, you might find, maybe if you run a restaurant, beef prices might be up, or maybe there's a push for labor. Labor prices might go up. But right now, everything is going up. And again, it's devastating for American businesses, and it is devastating for American families.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, the president keeps saying that he's doing everything that he can to lower energy prices. Of course, he's not allowing what needs to happen, and that is the United States to become energy independent. But what's your take in terms of what they can do? Biden's top officials have zero experience in business. You've analyzed the resumes of the officials in the administration, and you find that most of his economic team are lawyers, lobbyists, government employees. No business experience, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, where are the Andy Puzders? Where are the people who actually know how to run a business? And, we found that the majority of the top officials who work in the Biden administration, starting from the president and the cabinet, and we were really focusing on people who deal with finance and commerce and business issues. And we found that most of them, not only have they never run a business like Andy Puzder has, they've never even worked for a business. Most of them have spent their whole career as in academia or in government or as lawyers and so on. And so I think that's a real problem, Maria. You don't have anybody who's sort of knows the real life applications of how to grow a business, how to meet a payroll, how to deal with the logistical issues. And I think that's one of the reasons you've had the supply chain problems. I mean, after all, Maria, we didn't have supply chain problems when Donald Trump was president. And so I think Biden has got, if he asked me what to do, Maria, I would say you've got to bring in someone, you know, like a Fred Smith who ran FedEx, and put them in charge of the economy, because there's just a lack of, not just an ideological problem, but a lack of competence in this administration to deal with this crisis.
Yeah. Well, after all, Andy, this is the same group that told us inflation was transitory for a year and a half. And in a recent op-ed, you stated that Americans have gotten used to not working and would rather live off pandemic welfare. That also coming from this group that continues to push this climate change agenda. What is that doing to the economy?
Let me hear, Maria. I've actually worked on another article, and I look back at some of the comments that these individuals in the White House, who, as Steve said, really don't have the business experience that we need to get out of this. And what they've said is that this inflation that's devastating American families is either highly unlikely, transitory, temporary, about to go down, decelerating, and or peaking. It's also a high-class problem you should appreciate, caused by COVID, meat packers, Putin, or the oil companies, and never mind because the numbers are out of date anyway. So this is a collection of people who clearly should know better than this. The problem is they don't, and they keep trying to enact policies based on more government. You know, the typical Democrat approach. You have a problem that government creates. You blame anybody you can other than the government, and then the solution is more government. What they're ignoring is that this spending is really driving prices up. That's what hurting the American people, and it's encouraging people not to work, which hurts the supply chain. This is a collection of the wrong policies that's gone on far too long.
Absolutely no pivot, record high inflation, job cuts, record low approval ratings, and yet they're still pushing the agenda. No pivot at all. Steve Moore, Andy Puzder, great to talk with you both. Thank you so much for joining me this weekend.